Hi, friends! Welcome back to your Double Nerd Show, where we do history nerd shit and then D&D nerd shit. I'm Allegra, and joining me this week is the wonderful Sergio.
Hey!
He is our DM for Doom to Repeat, and he is now playing Brad the Sea Turtle, our our totally tubular dude. How are you doing, buddy?
Chakas all around. Yeah, nice to see you, Allegra. It's nice to be here. I'm excited.
Me too. Yeah, this is going to be super duper fun. Just a quick overview of what we're doing here. This is Heroes You Should Know, and on Heroes You Should Know, I tell you about historical figures that I think are important that we don't hear about for a myriad of reasons that you can imagine because you're a smart person. And then we turn them into D&D characters because why wouldn't we? Yeah. So this week we are going to be talking about Boudica or Boudica, or there's like 8,000
Yes.
different permutations of her name, of the
Yeah.
pronunciation, of the spelling. It's stupid. Not stupid, but like the amount is overwhelming a little bit. Like I think Welsh, her name is spelled Buddug.
Yeah, I've seen like Boudug, like kind of really weird. There's the
Right.
Latin Boudicia.
Mhm.
A lot of different
But like
versions.
fuck the Romans. That's something we should talk about real quick.
There'll be a
Serge,
theme
if
in this episode of Fuck the Romans.
it's a theme in my life, to be
Uh-huh.
honest. I fucking hate the Romans. So if I get too far off a fuck the Romans tangent, please feel free to like reel me back
I'll reel you back
in.
in, yeah.
Yeah. Also, a quick warning: there is going to be a sexual assault trigger warning up in this. So I'll just blanket that right now. I'll also give you a warning before it gets brought up in the episode. So if you need to step away, totally cool. Just so's we're all aware. But yeah, I'll let you know before it happens, so you can mute for however long. But we're gonna start about Boudica. So, and that's how I'm gonna say her name. I know Boudica and Boudica or whatever.
I'm glad because you're
Boudica's
pronouncing it the way that I think I would pronounce it.
right, and also like there's a song by Carlene or something like that, and she says Boudica, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna take your word for it
Mm.
because you're a singer, because that's logical. Anyway, um, so a lot of our information about her actually comes from the Roman perspective, which sucks. Mostly because the Celts didn't keep like a ton of written records. So specifically, a lot of our information comes from the historians Cassius Dio and Tactius, even though neither of them were present for the actual historical events. However, Tactius's father-in-law was involved in the suppression of the rebellion, and so he's kind of widely regarded as the more factual account. Cassius Dio is just a fucker who was like born 100 years later and like, I'm gonna talk about this like I know what I'm talking about. So there's that. um, and also, like, a part of this is she was fighting the Romans. So a lot of it's kind of skewed by that fact. And so there's not a whole lot known about her from the side of the Celts.
And it's very obvious in the artwork that we're displaying below where
Yeah.
she looks like she's dressing in Roman garb. And it's like, this is not what they would be looking
Right?
like.
They very much Romanized her
Mm,
for being like an enemy that they were very much against.
right.
So kind of a blanket phrase, Celts is going to be used a lot in here. So this is just a phrase to talk about the ancient people of Europe that weren't the Romans or the Greeks. So a lot of this is going to be, as a main whole, it's the Gaels, the Britons, and the Gauls. So the Gaels are the people of Scotland and Ireland. The Britons are the people who live in Britain, and the Gauls are the Celtic people of the continental Europe. Um, so within the Celts, there are dozens and dozens of independent tribes that live in the same area. So the Celts we're going to be talking about were kind of like serious warriors. They were described as barbaric by the Romans, but also like if you think about it, the Romans are super barbaric too. So like there's not really a anyway. Not going to go down that road. But they also created chainmail. They were the people who like innovated that, I suppose. They also already had paved roads, even though the Romans tried to take credit for having those first. But they were both wrong because there were actually stone paved roads as early as 4000 BCE in
Wow.
So back with our girl in Hedjuana. So pretty cool.
Very cool.
Um, Boudica was born around 30 CE, and it's kind of widely accepted that she was a noble from birth. She's described as tall with tawny hair that was really long, wearing colorful tunics and a gold necklace. So that was called a torque, and they were really thick, and they were made of a single piece. And they like there would be like a piece that went around the back, and then there were two like heavier bits that were at the front. So they were super hard to take off, and they were kind of seen as like a symbol of status. So like you had to be pretty wealthy and pretty well off within the community to have a torque. And then they also said she was loud but also intelligent. So kind of the coolest bitch. She may have been a druid. So in that time, the druids were priests of the tribe. They practiced medicine, alchemy. They were super duper like they were highly regarded as like the smartest people in the tribe. They performed the pagan rituals. Gender didn't matter. You could be whatever, and you could still be a druid. Um, but the presence of Romans kind of greatly diminished their religious freedom. So as like the Romans incurred upon them, the number of druids kind of dropped with that. She also would have been trained in weaponry and fighting. At that time, like the Celts, everyone was trained to fight because you had to, fight to protect your tribe.
Yeah, I
Um,
get the notion that the Celts in general, you had to be a pretty tough person to survive.
yeah,
They,
I think everyone was pretty stalwart.
yeah, they did not live in the lap of luxury as many Romans did, and certainly didn't have
Right.
the wealth and the technological advancement in certain ways. But yeah,
Well, actually, their tribe was pretty well off. Like the Celts had pretty good stores of like not necessarily what the Romans would have seen as like wealthy, but like to the Celt
sure.
people, they actually were pretty well off, which is really interesting to see. Anyway, so around age 18, she becomes the queen. She marries King Prastigus. I always get afraid I'm gonna mess up
Yeah,
his
I've
name,
heard
but I
it.
think it's
I heard it in a couple of videos talking about her, and I don't remember. But yeah, it's
Prastigus, Prasudigus,
yeah,
something like that.
Prasudigus is probably a good guessing.
Yeah. And they were part of the Iceni tribe in modern day Norfolk and Suffolk. She was pretty well liked. Everyone thought she was a badass, which makes sense. So a little bit before that, in 43 CE, the Romans had conquered southern England and they were steadily kind of working their way north.
Now, I have to stop you here for a second because
Yeah.
maybe I'm just dumb, but like, growing up, you always hear about how Western culture is influenced by the Romans, and
Mhm.
you don't really put two and two together. You just think, okay, we read their books or something. But no, of course, the Romans conquered Britain. They were there for a
Yeah.
period of time. And it's something I never really even thought about and thought it was fascinating. Two cultures that I never thought really interacted with each other.
Yeah. I mean, the Romans were so fucking widespread. It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I also forget that they conquered Britain. The only reason I remember it half the time is because of an episode of Doctor Who. I'm like, oh yeah, that is a thing. And like Doctor Who's maybe not always the most historically accurate, but I think in that respect it was.
You're saying the Queen of England didn't establish Torchwood?
You don't know.
Don't know.
They
That's
also
right.
could be lycanthropes. You don't know. um, anyway, so the Romans are working their way north, and Prasutagus knows his warriors can't go up against the legions like this. Like they're their most organized. They are just carving swaths
And I think
up
that's
in
where
England.
the Romans are more advanced than the Celts.
Oh, for sure.
They have the weapons of war down.
Yeah, they're like the phalanx, the
Yeah.
way they would like make the wedge and then go outward. Like they had so many tactics. Like it makes sense why they conquered so much because they were good fucking strategists. I hate
Yeah.
to give them compliments, but
Yeah.
they were good ass strategists. Um, so he knows the Romans are marching north. He knows that like there are other tribes who are getting taken by them. He knows that his army can't hold a candle to them in this respect. So he tells them, he's like, stand down, we have to chill, we have to come to a peaceful agreement with the Romans. So he came to the agreement with Claudius, who was emperor at the time. Okay, when I die, you can split the land with my two daughters. He and Boudica had two daughters, and the Romans would get like they would split it. It would be an equal kind of thing. Um, so Claudius is like, sure, whatever. Um, so the Romans, to integrate them into the society better, grant them a grant of their currency, which is 4 million sesterces, which I think someone converted it in a video I was watching, and it was something like $150 million or some
Jeez.
ridiculous fucking sum. So they give it, and they're like, here you go. This is how you're going to become integrated into society, and this is how you're going to become Roman. Even though the Celts had their own resources and they were very much self sufficient. So it starts out as grant, and then when Nero takes over in 54, they're like, kidding, it was a loan. You have to give it back to us because, of course, with interest.
Hmm.
So as I said, Nero takes over for Claudius in 54. When he's 16, Uh, and he's already this terribly irresponsible big spender. We all know about the saying of Nero played the fiddle while Rome burned. Like that's a Nero. I hate Nero.
Yeah, he's the
So he's
infamous neckbeard of history.
yes, perfect. So he becomes emperor. He's 16. He's spending all this money, and he decides the way to recoup their losses is like, hey, go after all these loans that I sent and like charge interest, all this shit. So he assigns Polinius as the governor of Britain, and Polinius is also the leader of the army, and he's sent to collect loans on all the tribes that they've sent them on, which include other tribes besides the Iceni tribe, other tribes in the area, which proves to be a pretty big point that reunites them later. But of course, they couldn't pay the loans back yet because they'd been in the Roman Empire for maybe 11 years
Yeah,
at the
no time
most.
at all.
Yeah. So like they had no resources to pay them back. And then Prasutagus dies in 60 CE, and Boudica becomes the sole ruler of the Iceni tribe. But the Romans are now claiming that they control all of the land and not just the part of the land that they were supposed to share with Prasutagus' two daughters. And of course, Boudica is not about that shit. So this is the point that an assault occurs. If you need to step away, please do so. Give me like 15, 20, 30 seconds. It's not going to be explicit, of course. But then I'll give you a thumbs up when it's cool to come back. So yeah, if you need to step away, please do so now. Okay. So as a means to humiliate the tribe, they publicly beat Boudica, they rape her two daughters, and they take the most valuable things from the tribe and sell a lot of the royals into slavery. It's not told how old the daughters were, but given that Boudica died when she was around 30, they can't have been terribly old.
Pretty
so
young, yeah, I'd assume.
Yeah. All right, everyone, come on back. We are not talking about that anymore. Okay, so Boudica's pissed. She's dealing with some shit, and she wants to get the Romans out. So 61 CE rolls around. The Romans start shifting their focus to taking Wales, which means they take a majority of their army along with Polinius over that way. And so Boudica calls together the leaders of the surrounding tribes who all have issues with the Romans. And so they meet, they like air their grievances, and they decide that they're going to come together, unite under Boudica, revolt, and drive the Romans out of Britain.
So much of this story, certainly this part at least, reminds me of other stories in history. I mean, probably most obvious, the story of Braveheart. The Scottish Rebellion. I mean, it was almost exactly the same to the T. This outside force that had conquered this island was, forcing them to do things, did awful things to the people, and inevitably the people were so pissed they started a huge rebellion.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of it comes from like they're trying to change the way of life that they've been living forever.
Right.
So I think not to get imperialist in here, but like I think a lot of the really successful empires did, because I think it was the Mongols that did this. They were like, okay, we've won. Like we've taken your land. We claim this is our land. You can keep living however you were living before. We don't give a shit. You just pay your taxes to us now. And that's the big difference.
Right. The Mongols, I think maybe the Persians may have done it at some point.
Yeah, the
I do
Ottoman...
remember throughout history class, there were standout civilizations that were like, all right, we'll be cool.
Not to be like, this is the way to have an imperialistic society, because like, fuck that.
Yeah.
But I think if we were talking about like successful empires, that's the way you have to do it, which that sounds terrible of me to say. Anyway.
It's just a natural progression of history,
Right. So most depictions of Boudica in this time period, I'm sure that in the pictures you've seen them, feature her in a chariot at the head of the army, war paint on her face, sword in hand, and both of her daughters riding with her into battle, which I think is so cool. Like, because I'm sure they were trained to fight too, so I'm sure they were like holding onto mom's skirt with one hand and like sword fighting out the back with the other, which is one of my favorite images ever. So Boudica leads an army of somewhere around 100,000 to 120,000 Celts to attack Camulodunum, Camulodunum,
That's a good guess. Yeah.
Romans, which is the modern day Colchester in England. So this is their like the Roman center of operation. But if you remember, it's being poorly defended right now because Rome is off trying to capture Wales. So Boudica and the Celts are easily or have an easy time taking it. They take no prisoners. They kill all the Roman citizens and the Celts who aligned themselves with the Romans. Um, but also, since we're getting this from the Romans, there is a chance that this is an everyone's barbaric but us take and like throwing it to the extreme because we really don't know what happened there from any equalizing perspective.
Sure.
So there's a chance that there were prisoners. There's a chance that there were people that they let go because the Romans say everyone's barbaric but us. So
it's like obviously we don't want to assume because we weren't there. But if I was Boudica, I was thinking about it. Like I would be so ruthless and
sure
savage to the Romans that I'm not surprised at all that there might not have been any survivors.
Oh no! Like I feel like if anyone was a survivor, it was Celts that were forced to align themselves, and like maybe she absorbed them into the army.
Sure.
But oh no, I think any Roman citizen was just fucking done for.
Sure.
Like she's done. So the historian Cassius Dio writes, all upon the Romans by a woman, a fact which in itself caused them the greatest shame. And it's my favorite thing.
Women!
Yeah, because like that's kind of where like the bullshit like patriarchy stuff started, was the Romans being like, men are above everyone else and women are subservient.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really evident when they're when you read kind of like the Roman the Romans talking about Boudica in a lot of these perspectives. It's just like, and it's a woman. It's a woman who's taking us down. Where everywhere else in history, or most places in history, it's pretty equal. It was like, all right, cool. You're a woman, great. We're gonna go fight some people. Yeah. You ready?
I feel like in societies like the one that Boudica grew up in, it's more about like, have you proven yourself? So she had to have proven herself as a badass, as competent, as a good leader. Like these are not societies where you can just stumble into positions of power easily.
She's got 120,000 people of different tribes who had been fighting before the Romans came.
Right.
Like they weren't always allies. Like these people came to an agreement under her, which is so like that has to mean so much. So they take Camulodunum, and then they move on. They take on the 9th Roman Legion. They burn Camulodunum to the ground. They even burn the temple there where the Romans like kind of gathered their last defenses. They were like, okay, we'll go to the temple. They surely won't fuck with the temple. They fucked with the temple. They burned it to the ground. The Romans were killed. So Polinius hears about this, and he starts to try to get in front of her. He evacuates Roman citizens where he can, fortifies where he can, and tries to like make strongholds. But Boudica's army is just too strong. Like they're not the same kind of organized, but they are massive in number, and they are pissed.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine what 100,000 pissed off people looks like, but it's a lot of people.
100,000 pissed off warrior, skilled warriors. Yeah. So like places just keep falling to Boudica's army, and it's growing a little bit too.
And like, how many successes does she actually have? Did you make note of that? Because I
she gets 3 or 4 successes.
Yeah, I was gonna say 3 or 4 big sacks of cities.
Yeah, she fucks some shit up at least 3 or 4 times. Which is to say, they take modern day Londinium, which is the biggest city in the Isles, burn it to the ground. One of the many times London gets burned to the ground. Exactly. Went after the people that lived there. Then they hit Verulamium. In a very similar fashion. They are, no quarter, no holds barred. They are out for blood, and they want to get the Romans the fuck out. So a lot of tribal people had been taken as slaves under the Romans. So when they're freed, they join up with the army, and the army keeps growing and growing and growing. And at the time, Nero actually considered pulling out of the Isle altogether because Boudica was wreaking so much havoc. And if she had succeeded in this last battle, it probably would have brought about the fall to the Roman Empire. Like, can you imagine?
That I was thinking as I was doing research about Boudica, like, God, what if she had succeeded? Like, all of history would have changed because, you know, the English brought Western culture and society to other places. Like, it would have been so different. This kind of Celtic, pagan, nomadic people, it just would have been a totally different thing.
Man, there's an alternate timeline somewhere where that fucking happened.
Yep.
And I bet like alternate timeline us are living their best lives in that world. Not that we're not living great lives here, but
it would have been,
you know,
really, really different. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it would have at least driven the Roman Empire out of Britain. Why do you think it would have brought the downfall of the Roman Empire?
Well, I think it would have a lot to do with Roman mentality, in that, you know, it's this, you know, it's a tiny island far away. Like, it shouldn't matter. Like, this should be easy for us. And then add to that, it's a woman. And like, I think that mentality of like, we lost this island to a woman would have been kind of a fracturing moment for them, and maybe a lot of questioning. I don't know. I think it would have put them on the hill to like downfall a lot faster.
Sure, I think that makes sense. I mean, look, the Roman Empire, I don't know my history that well, but this has to be close to the end of the Roman Empire anyway, right? So it was on the way out.
The end. Yeah. So yeah, it was on the way out. So I think this did definitely like shake them a little bit. Yeah. So they continue seizing power. And their idea was like before this last big battle, they were like, okay, we don't have a whole ton of our resources anymore, but we can go to the Roman food resources and we can take that, we can eat, and like this is what will sustain us as we continue forward. But Polinius was a step ahead of them and burned it down before he went to Wales, or when he came back from Wales. I'm sorry, when he came back from Wales, he burned it to the ground. So when they got there was nothing left, and Boudica's army was kind of like scrounging for food at that point. So now we come to the final battle, which is the Battle of Watling Street. So Watling Street was a Roman road in England, but historians kind of disagree about where it was. But they're saying it's somewhere in the Midlands.
You'd think that a major like highway like this would have a better designation than a street, like at least an avenue or something, you know?
Nah, it's just Watling Street. Also Watling. Watling's a fun word to say. Yeah. So the way the Romans set themselves up very well, because they are good strategists, and they knew that she was coming. So they set themselves up on top of a hill, and behind them was a forest. So they knew that no one was going to come at them from behind. They were controlling where the attack would be coming from. But their army was significantly smaller than Boudica's army. I didn't write down how small it was, but I think it was only like a few thousand.
I saw in one of the videos I was watching, they showed an example. I mean, and it was a pretty impressive Roman army, but compared to the hundreds of thousands of they were tiny.
Yeah.
So they needed that advantage.
Exactly. Like they set themselves up well. And so, you know, the Celts are fighting uphill. They're weak from not having food. The Romans also have full shields. They have full armor, and they have javelins that they can throw long distances. So and they'd set themselves up in a fashion that they had lines, like the shield people were at the front, and then they would have people behind them throwing spears, and they'd have people that would switch out from the shields and people that would switch out from the front line of fighting, so people would get a rest. Right. Whereas the Celts were like all or nothing, like whole hog going after it, everyone at once. So, you know, as you can assume, it didn't go well for the Celts. So the Romans lost about 400 soldiers, whereas the Celts lost more than 80,000.
That's crazy to think about.
That's 80% on the small end. That's 80% of their army. No. So they obviously lose these people, and they get the fuck out. They're like, we can't. And it took them a while to flee because they had such good feelings about this battle that they had brought along like caravans of their families.
Oh.
Yeah, and they'd set the caravans up around the back of around the back of the battlefield, so they'd essentially box themselves in. So it took them a while to figure out how to get everyone out of the way and
Ooh,
then
that's
go.
brutal.
So it was just a really unfortunate loss in multiple directions. So there's not really a clear-cut explanation of what happened to Boudica. Some people say she was killed in the battle. Most people say, though, that she and her daughters did survive, and then after they left, they drank poison rather than endure being captured by the Romans. And at the time, this would have been seen as the honorable thing to do. You know, you've lost 80% of your army. You've lost this huge battle. It's like an honorable thing to do. Is like, all right, I'm not fit to be leader anymore. I'm done.
Right.
Although Cassius Dio posits that she survived and then died years later of illness, but like, Cassius Dio, where the fuck did you get that?
Yeah, that sounds like something made up. Because it
sounds
makes
like
sense
bullshit.
that she would have led the army, probably would have gotten injured in the process, and probably would have said, time to check out before they get me and make an example of me and make things even worse, you know?
It would have been so much. It would have been horrifying.
It would have been the end of Braveheart.
Right, exactly. It would have been so bad, and I'm sure she felt a lot of responsibility because all of those tribes did come together under her lead, and she led them through all of this, and so I think a lot of that is also like guilt and honor kind of mixing into one. So as a result of the rebellion, the Romans did retain their power in Britain, but after Nero passed away, the oppressiveness of their rule kind of lessened. So they weren't as ham-handed. They were still fucking Romans, but they weren't as heavy-handed. There were several other small rebellions. But none of them were as successful or as widely well received as Boudica's. So once again, motherfucker Cassius Dio has written this speech that he claims Boudica said before the last battle. And a line from it is, "Win the battle or perish. That is what I, a woman, will do. You men can live on in slavery if it's what you want." Which feels like the fakest fucking quote, because there's no reason for her to make the distinction that she's a woman. There is no reason.
Yeah, it's clearly tainted by Roman ideology and
right. So it feels like a very and like calling herself a woman to put down the men feels very Roman. So I just wanted to dig at the Romans again. That's why I added that in there. Fuck Cassius Dio. So no, none of her remains have been found. There's not really a marked grave for her. However, in 2001 and 2002, there was an archaeological dig called the Wet Wang Graves.
I didn't read that until just now. That's funny.
I'm an adult. I can say Wet Wang Graves without giggling. Yes. So it unearthed a skeleton of a tall warrior woman in her 30s or 40s with a pretty lavish burial that would have been given to someone of a higher status. There was a chariot buried with her alongside two smaller skeletons who were also buried like warriors. So it's speculated that is Boudica and her daughters, though the carbon dating calls that into question. But also there have been studies recently that are like, carbon dating is not exact. Carbon dating might have been fucked up. So it may or may not be Boudica. I kind of like the idea that it is.
I like the idea that it is too. It's also just like, what other female warrior with two smaller warriors is like known in history? And
a chariot. Yeah. Like the chariot's a big thing too. So
it adds up.
Yeah, I think so. Like, probably it is. Who knows? They're in a research facility at I think it's the British Museum. I can't remember.
Maybe they'll clone them and we'll find out.
That would be so fucking dope.
Jurassic Park, but with like ancient warriors.
Boudica Park. There's a statue of her in London on her chariot with her two daughters, and so she's seen as the the symbol for the human desire for freedom and justice, which I think is a little bit funny coming from the British.
Yeah, She's the
but
British example of the human desire for freedom and
right,
justice.
right.
It is cool to see though that she really had a consistent influence in
Right.
English history. She kept coming up. The Queen was compared to her at one point and things like that.
hmm Yeah, like she was kind of lost to history for a little bit, and then she was brought back by Tactius and Cassius Dio, and then she was lost for a little bit, and then Victoria kind of came around. And their names kind of mean the same thing, so I think
That's
that's where a
right.
lot of parallels were drawn to. And her image was also adopted by the suffragettes in the early 1900s during the women's suffrage movement. So yeah, that's our girl Boudica. There's I wish there was more about her because she seems
Yeah.
like the coolest bitch on the planet.
Yeah, I do wish there was a little bit more about her actual personal life and
Right.
like the day to day things of the Sinai people, because yeah, a lot of it tends to kind of go over the same subjects, the wars, the battles,
Yeah.
but there's still a lot left to unearth about who Boudica was.
Yeah. So Serge, I am very excited to see what you built for Our Lady.
Well, I think I did an okay job. It's a kind of a basic build, but I think it's a good start where I'll show you what I have, and I think you have some very clever ideas. But I kind of approached building Boudica in a timeline sense, like like she gained levels in this thing at a certain point in her life, that kind
Right.
of stuff. So like
Caleb did something very similar, and
yeah,
I'm not surprised that you guys built
yeah.
things this like in a similar way.
So I started with Ranger. I
Okay.
made her. I chose 4 levels of Ranger, but I decided that if you were going to be a Celt, if you were going to be in the Iceni tribe, you were probably a pretty capable Ranger, at least a level 2 Ranger.
Oh yeah.
And you knew the way of the land, you knew how to get around, you knew how to survive. And I in my research I did learn that the Celts were very good with horses. They had a lot of horses and they raised horses and trained
Yeah.
horses. So Ranger also makes sense. Eventually, I chose the Ranger archetype of what is it called, Beastmaster, because I wanted to have a horse companion for Boudica. It would make sense that maybe the horse leading on her chariot was a horse she had ridden and trained and all that kind of stuff. So
Mhm.
4 levels of Ranger, some
Yes.
spells in there for the fighting style. I chose Druidic Warrior for
Nice.
her, so that's where kind of some of the Druidic influence comes from
Yeah, for
in
sure.
Ranger. But then I thought, okay, at a certain point, she had to leave the basic Iceni life. Basic, she was a noble for sure.
Right. Yeah.
But the kind of simpler life to combat this incredible enemy. And I think that's when she would become a paladin. She would take 4 levels of paladin, and to me, the oath that makes the most amount of sense was the oath of the crown. She is royal. She is now
hmm
the queen of all of these people. She takes an oath of the crown to protect these people and to protect the sovereignty of the Iceni peoples. So I did 4 levels of that. Nothing particularly special about beyond that in terms of paladin.
hmm
And I think the paladin choice definitely comes after the Romans do what they do to her and her daughters. Like
Right.
game's over, right?
That's it. Yeah. That was where I marked Paladin too. I was like,
Yes,
that's where that
yes.
happens.
Uh, and then I think once we get into the actual combats and the fighting, that's where I think the final 4 levels, because we went to 12,
We
the
did, yeah. We
final
cheated a
four
little bit.
levels was Barbarian.
Yes.
Because and it's funny because you wouldn't think to put Barbarian last. Sometimes people put Barbarian first in their builds
Mhm.
and stuff, but I just think the savagery of battle would have hardened her. I think it would have changed her. I think that her rage and her anger would have fueled her in those final weeks and months.
For sure.
And I chose under Barbarian the ancestral path. And the
Ooh.
reason I did that was because I thought about the Iceni people, probably pagans, probably worshipped
Mhm.
gods, probably also gave a lot of reverence to their ancestors.
Mhm.
And I could see Boudica, that late night before battle, praying to her ancestors, praying to those who came before her, maybe even her husband, and just
Oh, I'm
asking
sure.
for their guidance and their strength. So to me, the ancestral guardian makes sense, that path. Um, where do we go next? The abilities?
Yeah, just tell me, how'd she stat out? How'd you end up there?
Honestly, she's a Boudica to me is an example of an intelligent barbarian, or a barbarian that leans on the more mental stats. I
Right,
gave her a strength of 12, so she can keep herself up in combat, but she's not a unstoppable force. A
right.
dexterity of 10, just normal dexterity. A
Mhm.
constitution of 8. I gave her that as the lowest stat because I wanted to reiterate that she was very mortal. She was
Mhm.
successful and she got very far, but at the end of the day, the Romans were just too much, and they ended up defeating her. But
Right,
her intelligence is 13, her wisdom is 15, and her charisma is 14. So for those paladin and ranger spells, she would be pretty effective.
right.
Um, Beyond that, I didn't really give her anything special. For her background, I was debating between noble, which seems like an obvious and good choice, but I
Right.
decided to go with inheritor. It says you are the heir to something of
Ooh.
great value, and I thought that was kind of an interesting flavor on. She
Yeah.
was taking on the role of a leader. She wasn't necessarily always a leader. Um, and for the ASIs, one of them I just dumped it into dexterity so that she was as high as possible in that. And then the other two, one of them I chose inspiring leader,
Nice.
and and one of them I chose mounted combatant, because I love the idea of her riding a horse
Ah,
and striking
yes!
dudes. So and again, relating it back to their relationships with their horses and stuff, I thought that would be a good feat.
Hell yeah.
But otherwise, in terms of equipment, nothing special. I didn't think of any good
Basic shit.
magic items or anything like that.
Right.
But I think that's kind of how I would have started building a Boudica.
Nice. Did you have any, like, thoughts on what god she would be kind of, following for her paladin?
I don't always equate paladin to gods. I always equate it more to like the oath itself is what's powering
That's
them.
fair.
But if she's going to be following something, it's going to be a pagan god. I'm not super familiar with pagan gods, but I know that there's many of them and they're nature influenced and stuff like that. So probably like a druidic, deity.
Nice.
But yeah, that's my
Uh,
that's my build for her.
oh, I love it. I really like it. We were very similar,
Yeah,
actually. Um,
I like some of your flavorful changes though too.
yeah, it's a little bit, chaotic, which shouldn't be surprising. Um, so I took, Barbarian 6, Druid 2, and Paladin 4. So I actually started with Barbarian because Fighter feels more Roman to me,
Sure.
and Barbarian feels like much more emotional than Fighter does, which maybe is why I haven't played a Fighter yet. um, so I gave her Barbarian, and I went with what did I go with? Where is my thing? Path of Wild Magic,
Yeah.
because I love wild magic, first of all. And second of all, it's tied to like beauty and like intense emotion, which kind of is her whole thing. Like the Romans even describe her as very intense and very like loud and intelligent, and
Yeah.
like I just feel like she kind of exudes that feeling. Um, so we started there, and then I went Druid 2, Circle of Wildfire, which is all about kind of like in order for things to get better, sometimes you have to fuck them up.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to absolutely raise it to the ground.
Yeah, that to me
And
is
then
your most inspired choice, is going the wildfire route, because yeah, I think in our research there is a lot about her raising cities and
she
setting things
burns
on
shit.
fire, so it's very appropriate.
Right. And I also like the idea of her being like having the capacity to tank in three different ways. Like tank in rage, tank in I'm just gonna be a big fucking animal, and tank in the like classic paladin sense.
Yeah,
Um, and then also for paladin, I took Oath of Vengeance because, as you said, like after all of that went down with the Romans, it's over for them.
yeah.
Like she is here to divine smite them, and that is it.
Vengeance is for sure the next most logical. For me, it was. I was like
Yeah,
either vengeance or the crown. I think
I
vengeance
looked
makes a
at
lot of
Crown too.
sense.
I think.
Yeah,
Yeah. So she sat it out as a strength of 16, just because I know I had to have it fairly high
hmm
for barbarian and paladin.
yeah,
Dexterity of 12, Constitution of 14, because like leading an army cannot be. You have to have like some kind of will within yourself to
Sure.
keep that shit going.
Sure.
I actually dumped her intelligence, but it more comes from, in my head, intelligence is very much like book learning and stuff that's by rote.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Whereas wisdom, which is 15 for her, is very much more like interpersonal and like logical and world intelligence rather than book intelligence.
That makes sense.
And her charisma is 14 as well. Let's see. She knows Druidic and Common. I also gave her Primordial and Sylvan, which I think that's mostly flavor so that she can wreck shit.
Yeah.
And talk to people while she does it.
Mm-hmm.
For her barbarian, I gave her an ASI. I think I pumped wisdom and constitution for that one, if I'm remembering correctly. And then I gave her inspiring leader as well because it's obvious and a good choice.
It's a great choice for this character in particular, for sure.
Right. She has danger sense, reckless attack, extra attack, like you do for barbarians. Mm-hmm. And then with wild magic, the three of the things that she has is magic awareness. So as an action, you can like open your awareness and like figure out where there's magic in the vicinity, which I think could translate in game very cool to like where like the Roman magic folks hanging out. Mm-hmm. Wild surge also means that sometimes magic just happens, and when you enter a rage, you roll on the wild magic table, which I love.
Yeah, that's great.
And like just the idea of the like her inner power just coming out in like, okay, I'm pissed off, and now you better run because I don't know what's going to happen, and you don't either. And then at 6th level, you get bolstering magic, which means that you can like use the magic that's just like innate within you to bolster your companions. Either give back spell slots or add to ability checks and attack rolls, which as a leader makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. I was definitely looking for abilities that bolstered my allies because that was something she had to have done, being around them and leading them into battle and the, her speeches, I'm sure, were inspiring. So
yeah. For wild shape, so for druid, she doesn't get a whole lot because it's only a 2. But with Circle of Wildfire, you get burning hands and cure wounds all the time, prepared whenever, which is I think really perfect for her.
For sure.
And then you also get Summon Wildfire Spirit, which means you just put a little elemental on the field and it wreaks havoc. Yeah. And you can tell it what to do and it goes and does it.
I was reading about that and thought that was really a fun addition to it.
Yeah.
I like to imagine that it's maybe the fire elemental just looks like her daughters kind of running around.
Oh, that would be so
cool,
cute.
Right?
Like she has a third little elemental daughter just like rocking around with like flame hands. Oh, I love that.
That you bring up the daughters. It makes me think about whether we should consider the daughters as being hirelings or, they have those elements of D&D, like the followers or whatever.
Yeah. Oh.
I think they could have counted as hirelings.
Probably. like as a DM, I'd be like, sure, we're gonna call them something besides hirelings because they're your kids. Daughters. But yeah, we'll count it.
Mechanically, they're hirelings.
Right. And then for Paladin, Oath of Vengeance, there's Abjure Enemy, which the creature's frightened of you, which tracks. Mm-hmm. The creature can be frightened of you, or they take a little bit of extra damage. And then there's also Vow of Enmity, which means that you also can you have advantage on the attack against the creature of your choice until minute's up or until it drops to 0 hit points, which I think would be fucking terrifying. As like if I were a Roman soldier and she Vow of Enmitied me, I'd be like, no, I change sides, I give up, please. But there's also Divine Held, Divine Smite, Lay on Hands, and I gave her Dueling, which I think it fit better than I wanted to give her Protection, but then I realized that would involve a shield, and she didn't really have a shield, so dueling was the next best choice.
I feel like if I if I could maybe do it again, I would try to make her a little bit more dex based, because they were of course using spears and javelins and
Yeah,
stuff. So I'm sad that I wasn't able to kind of figure out how to make that work, because barbarian, you need a certain amount of strength. But
right.
yeah, I would have totally gone your route as well with the dual wielding.
Yeah, I think if I was playing her like as an actual character, I think I would have built her a little bit differently. But trying to keep in like
Yeah.
historical context made me build her a little differently. But
See, I don't
yeah,
mind when they're not perfectly built. Like, what I really do kind of prefer, like, okay, I'm choosing paladin because this thing happened in this character's life, and it
exactly.
makes more sense to do it. So I don't mind if
Right.
they're not balanced or.
Yeah, like
Uh,
I would have kept the same classes, I think. I think I would have just statted her out differently.
mm. For my channel divinity, the Oath of the Crown has champion challenge. When you issue a
Ooh.
challenge that compels other creatures to do battle with you, each creature of your choice within 30 feet must make a wisdom saving throw. On a failed save, they can't move more than 30 feet away from you.
Ooh.
And then Turn the Tide, I think, gives a d6 plus 1 plus your charisma modifier, to hit points to your allies within 30 feet of you. So I thought that was kind of cool too.
Yeah, a good like ally pump is
Yeah,
solid.
yeah.
Also for Drew or for Paladin, she would get Bane and Hunter's Mark,
Mm,
which are good spells.
yeah,
I also gave her Command, Thunderwave, Entangle, and Wrathful Smite, which just the logic of it's there.
yeah,
I
absolutely.
don't need to explain it.
The only difference in spells I think I chose control flames or control fire or flame. I guess it's
Yeah,
flames to kind of
yeah,
symbolize her,
fucking shit on
leaning
fire.
into burning things.
Right. I think if I hadn't done Oath or Circle of Wildfire, I would have taken that. But I was
Yeah,
like, I already have a little
yeah,
elemental. I don't need you.
for sure.
And then for cantrip, she has resistance and shillelagh. Because I have this stupid image in my head, so I'm going to make you listen to the dumb image I've made in my head, but I love it. Um, having two attacks, casting shillelagh on your spear, using the butt end of it to hit someone once, and then stab down through them twice.
Nice.
And I like that idea a lot, and
Hell
it's
yeah.
fun.
And it's a magical weapon.
Exactly. So I gave her the druidic focus as her torque, just because I think
That makes
that's a
sense.
cool flavor thing.
Yeah.
A handful of extra little things, items that I think would be useful for her. Amulet of Health, because everyone can use an Amulet of Health.
Hmm.
Braces of Defense or Ring of Protection, just because her AC's kind of low. It's at 13,
Yeah.
but also it makes sense because she's unarmored and she's fighting in the middle of a chariot. Circlet of Blasting for more firepower. The sword, the Defender, also the Flame Tongue sword. There's also the Mace of Terror, which makes people afraid of you
Yeah.
in like a 30-foot circle. The Sunblade, and also the Sword of Sharpness, which will let you just lop limbs off people if you roll right. If you roll right, you just cut limbs off people.
Now, are you saying you gave her all of these weapons?
No, I'm just saying, like, if she were to have a cool weapon, it might be one of these.
I was gonna say she just needs one of them, and she could have beat the entire Roman army.
I think Sword of Sharpness is my favorite one for her, but they're all cool.
Okay.
And then I went through the gods just in the player's handbook.
Mm.
That might be someone she would kind of ally with. Tritherion, Kiri Joleth, and Daldorn are kind of the top three that I'm like, one of those would have, because they're all about like honor and justice. And then there's Lathander, Helm, Tempest, and Torm. So any of those could have been cool
Yeah,
as
good choices.
a god for her to hang out with.
For sure.
Yeah, oh yeah, and she's a noble because easy. But that's about it. That's my build for her as well.
Yeah, I mean, a very interesting character and a very interesting point in history that you don't think about or learn about too often. I
Right.
guess if you're not British, maybe the British are taught more about her than the
Yeah.
English or the Americans are. But this is my first time learning about her. But fascinating character and just so many similarities between her and other freedom movements, whether it be the Scots, whether it be the I mean, so often it tends to be somebody versus the English. You know what I mean?
Right.
Just, I'm
Yeah.
thinking of like
Like it
India
slowly
and
shifts
stuff.
to the Romans,
Yeah,
The British being the Romans,
yeah,
which I wonder if that's like that mentality was probably definitely taken, like the the imperialist entire mentality that the British eventually have
Of course.
probably definitely came from the
Yeah,
Romans.
of course. And like that mentality comes from the superiority, like we know that we're better than you in the sense of at least militarily, so they can kind of throw their weight around. But that also was their downfall for a lot of those battles because they
Right.
were unprepared for the Celts to attack. They caught them with their pants down, so it's a double-edged sword when it comes to that superiority.
Yeah, they're just they underestimated people, and that was kind of where it all
Yep.
came crashing.
Yep.
Thank you so much for doing this with me, Serge. This was so much fun.
I had a blast. I can't wait till the next one.
Yes. Is there anything you wanna what do you say? You say plug and like talk about
Yeah.
what are you jamming on, Serge?
Well, what am I jamming on? I'm jamming on our new
That was
show,
weird.
Ahsoka. I'm trying not to say Ahsoka because it's a different person, a
Ahsoka
different
Tano.
different world. But loving our show, Ashoka. We're doing it every Friday where we're releasing it, but we're also doing it live where we'll play it back on Twitch and we're all hanging out in the chat. So if people want to hang
That's
out with us and
awesome.
talk, we're hanging out there every Friday. But I mean, loving Ironsworn, you're going to be on Ironsworn with me. In fact, I think
I will have been.
yeah, this is we're recording this now, but we're going to play tomorrow. So
Yeah.
this will be in the future or the
In the future
past.
past,
Either
past
way.
future.
Yeah, so yeah, check out our Ironsworn game. What else? Pretty soon we're gonna start recording Doom to Repeat again. Can't wait
So
to
excited.
start doing that. So Arc
I'm
2,
so
so that's
scared.
coming. Few weeks,
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, I'm having a blast with everything we're doing, and enjoy seeing everybody join us in the chat when we run this
Yeah.
stuff.
So lovely. Well, thank you again for doing this with me. As ever, friends in the chat, if you have people you want us to cover, please let me know. I have a very long list of historical figures. I always want to learn about more historical figures, so please hit me with those. Also, if you can think of another system that you want me to try and build a character in, I would love to
Ooh.
do that as well. I'm doing D&D just because that's the one I'm most comfortable with, and that's the one that that has a lot of versatility that I'm aware of, but I'm woefully unaware of many TTRPGs. So if you have one that you think would be cool to try it in, I would love to hear about it.
Yeah, they'd be interesting to try a different system depending on like who the person is. I feel like D&D
Yeah.
works really well for all the history characters, but maybe more modern people.
Yeah, I thought about trying to do like Delta Green at some
Yeah.
point, and I was like, I don't know. I don't know how I could classify them as government like officials.
It would be hard. It'd be more just like selecting what abilities they have
Right.
percentages in or something.
Yeah.
But it's a good idea.
Yes. Well, thank you everyone for joining us, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks with a new hero you should know. Have a good
Bye.
night.